On-Screen Manitoba is an innovative membership-driven association that leads, builds, and represents the Manitoba screen-based industry.
Hi, my name is Scott Albert. I'm one of the partners in a company called GopherX.net, and we do web series and short form series. We've done a bunch of them, but our latest one is Tights and Fights Ashes, which is a web and transmedia comedy about superheroes.
Hi, I'm Christian Viel. I'm the owner and producer at Movie Seals Digital. I do a web series called Heroes of the North. It's also about superheroes, just like Scott, but it's different. It's also transmedia, but it's a bit different, different tone.
My name is Mike Fly. I work with Sexy Nerd Girl Inc., which is our primary project is a project. It's a transmedia project called Sexy Nerd Girl, which flows into a web series called Versus Valerie. I also am a producer and director on Comedy Bar, which is a web series that we developed with Byte TV. And yeah, it's great to be in Winnipeg.
Excellent.
To me, transmedia is essentially multi-platform storytelling. Whether that means that you're telling the story through a combination of social media, or you're combining a television property with an online video component, or you're producing supplementary material that's looked at on a secondary screen, I think that it's a really blurry world, but I think to me transmedia means that you're using multiple platforms to tell your story. That may or may not be an industry standard definition, but that's how I look at it.
Well, I see transmedia the same way pretty much as Mike. I mean, for us, transmedia, we tell part of the story through comic books, part of our story is told through character diaries, part of it is told through videos. But, if you just go to one element, you have a complete story, but if you look at everything, you have a mega story that everything connects with each other. So that, for me, that's what transmedia is.
Yeah, I think transmedia, it can be controversial. I think there are many people out there with different subtle interpretations of what it means. And I agree with what these guys have said, but for me it's really important that, that the transmedia is a story that's told over different platforms and different technologies, but it's got one ethereal voice. Like for instance, you can think of a story world like something like Star Wars, which has movies and books and comic books. But although I'm sure there is, a person or a group of people who decide, what is Star Wars and what isn't Star Wars, there's not one person in charge of all of that storytelling. In television series production, there's a job called showrunner, executive producer, and that's someone who just makes sure that there's a bunch of writers and directors and who are working on each episode, and that each episode has a similar voice, so that the series seems like one series and not a bunch of discrete, very different ways of telling stories. And I think transmedia, it's very important that you have that sort of voice across all the platforms, and it's not one person doing comic books and one person doing video episodes and one person doing blogs. And although they share a story world, they're not really overseen in the same way. I think, to me, that's the difference between like a multimedia and transmedia, or maybe cross-platform and transmedia. I don't know. There's all these different words. Transmedia is the latest buzzword, and some people get very upset when you say transmedia.
It's definitely transmedia is definitely not a word that is well received within parts of the community, but it is the cleanest and simplest word to get people talking about what it is that we're creating. You'll find people that find the word web series to be one thing and transmedia series to be a pretentious way of saying web series, but ultimately to make life easier, I think it's a word that we can use to define something, this type of storytelling specifically and cleanly. Well, web series, I think the whole premise behind a web series is that it's original content created in a serialized fashion for digital distribution on the internet in some way, shape, or form. Generally, that's video content, so that's generally a video series that retains either a stylistic or a form or a narrative element that remains consistent throughout the series. So a web series can be anything. It can be a narrative story that follows a single character or a group of people. It can be a lifestyle series. It can be a docu-series. It can be anything at all. It can be an informative series about something, or a how-to series, but it just means that it's coming out online and it is specifically a unified voice for whatever it is. That's the most generic definition of what a web series is. The differentiation being that on the web, you have total control of it, in theory, as the producer when it comes to the content, the distribution model, the time format that you're adhering to, the structural format that you're adhering to, the technical capacities that you're adhering to. And that's something that's not necessarily afforded to you in broadcast television.
But can any show that's on broadcast TV be a web series?
Can any show that's on broadcast TV be a web series? Yes and no. It's a different medium, so you have to write to that medium. Generally, episodes aren't 24 minutes so long, but yet some web series are. Some web series put out hour-long episodes. It becomes a series that doesn't adhere to a specific format, and that's one of the strengths of what a web series is. Versus broadcast television, where you're generally delineated into either 15-minute, 20 or half hour, or 1 hour, or 90-minute increments. You don't have those restrictions. You don't have the content restrictions. You don't have the technical restrictions that you're working with there. So yes and no. They can be and they can also not be.
Almost any question about web series, the answer you'll get is yes and no. You have to, yes, any story can be told online. Anything that can be shot with a camera can be put online, and it's a web series. But also at the same time, there's, lots of people have different ideas about what works best and what doesn't work best. But I would say if you want to do a web series, just do it, and there you're done.
Well, I agree with the guys too. Like, it's really hard to pinpoint. It really depends on the story you're trying to tell, and you usually try to find the best medium to tell it. And then the web allows a lot of flexibility in the way of telling the story, which you don't necessarily find in broadcast, or you don't necessarily find in feature film, but doesn't necessarily mean either that you can make a feature film on the web, or like, it really adapts itself. You have to adapt it to what you need to tell, the story you want to tell. But what's great about the web is the fact that we can have all these mediums together. Like, we can have video, we can have writing, like novels or blogs, so it's the combination of all that makes it appealing, because it really opens up the way you can tell your story, which you can't really do with the normal or the old mediums. There is no rules, and the beauty of it is that what you get with the web series is freedom, which you don't get in any other medium form, because there's gatekeepers. In the web series world, you are the creator, you can be the writer, you're also the distributor. There's nobody that can tell you what to do or not to do, and that's what's appealing to the creators. The only limitation that you would have on doing a web series is how much money you have to put on that screen or on your project itself. That's the only limit you have.
I don't know, though. I would argue, too, that you come with that freedom. However, you're the one who's making your own rules. So you still want to be adhering to a level of quality that because it is your name that you're putting out there. It's your project and it's your brand that you're building. So you don't want to put something out there that isn't representative of that. And I don't know, there are people who work in the TV industry that produce shows that, they're not super passionate about, but it's work. That's a reality. But in the web series world, I think you don't find that. You find people who are really passionate about an idea, about a story, about a character, about a style of storytelling, and they try their best to achieve that, and they set their own goals and their own targets and their own rules to play by, because that's how they can define their success. It's not going to be the same kind of financial success that you're going to get out of a movie or out of a TV series. So meeting your goals, I think, is a huge part of finding success in the web series world.
Anything to add to that, Scott?
Oh, it's my turn. What is the question? Are there any rules? You know, it depends. Like once again, it's yes and no. It kind of depends who you ask. But for me, I just want everyone to do web series. So if someone comes up to me and says, you know, can I do a web series about this? The answer is yes, of course. Go ahead and do it. And the more you do it, the more you learn what works for you and what doesn't work for you. But I think, like as a community, no web series person would turn to another web series person and say, you know, that's not a web series. Because any video that gets put online, you know, and there's an episodic or serialized, there's like episodes to it, that's a web series. And I know there's people who like have hierarchies of web series, like, you know, there's a woman who's a part of our group who she does Dexter's Rough Life, where she shoots her dog and she, you know, makes up a funny little story and has her dog sing songs. And it's a really cute, amazing web series. But because it's not like story based, there are people who are like, oh, well, you know, she shouldn't be doing that. And I think one of the most important things about web series is, well, she should be doing it because she wants to do it. There's no gatekeepers. You shouldn't tell anyone that you can't do that as a web series or you can't do whatever. So, I don't know. Yes and no.
I will say, though, that it really depends on what your end game is, right? If you're creating a series that you want to monetize, you're going to have to adhere to probably, you know, constraints. If you're going to create a series that you're trying to get seen by a specific audience, you're going to have to follow rules that follow with that specific audience. You're probably not going to be able to make a show for kids where there's a lot of swearing in the show. I mean, you could make it, but will it find an audience? I don't know. But there are constraints that you have to work with, and if you're going to be applying for funding, then you need to be a legal entity, you need to be a registered corporation. So if you're defining your goals to be a web series that's become something that is monetizable and successful later on, then you're going to set that bar up at a certain level and you're going to try to do everything you can to meet that. That's not to say you can't go out and shoot your dog and you can't release a web series that is whatever you want it to be. You're just defining those goals differently at that point.
Yeah.